Hey everyone. So, for today, I have a really great game that I picked out. So this one is played by Frank Marshall as the white pieces, and as the black pieces we have Amos Byrne. I like looking at games with Frank Marshall, and I always enjoy going over them because he was always one of the most crazy attacking players, and all of his games have these really interesting, crazy combinations going on. And so it's always really fun to see what he does. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this one went. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, and so we just have a normal Giuoco Piano starting out. c3, knight f6, and most people probably know the Giuoco Piano, and that's one of the first chess openings that you usually learn. Usually you learn it pretty early on. And a lot of players will probably think of the Giuoco Piano as a slower, quiet opening. And that's what Giuoco Piano actually means. You could say Giuoco Piano actually translates out to something like quiet or slow game, something like that. And so it has a reputation of being a slower, quieter opening. But it can also become very attacking and very quick, aggressive type positions as well. And that's what we're going to see in this game. Yeah, it's Frank Marshall, so we're not going to see the quiet lines. d4, e takes, c takes, and bishop b4. Again, this is all mainline theory, played thousands and thousands of times, and everybody plays this. The main moves here, the main move is bishop d2, and that's probably what you were expecting if you've seen this before. And that's the main move. And after something like bishop d2, bishop takes, knight takes, d5, and all of this, we get a position where it's activity of pieces, but black has the isolated pawn. And I want to show this position to you because this is one of the things about the Giuoco Piano, the more active lines, is you get this isolated pawn. And as we all know, isolated pawn, usually the strategy is for black is to remove the minor pieces and get to a position where the pawn will become weak. White wants to try to make the activity worth something. And this is how it usually goes. So I wanted to bring this up because the variation we're going to see is a lot different than this. But in order to understand one of the strategic points of the variation that we get to in the main game, I want you to see this position. Now let's go back to bishop b4 check. After this move, I mentioned we just went for bishop d2. That's the main line. There's also knight c3, which is a pawn sacrifice, and it's played. I never liked that variation. I usually went for the bishop d2 version. You get the king out of check. But here's what Frank Marshall did. And this is going to seem really strange at first. King f1, which is a really strange move, you think at first, because just moving the king, giving up the ability to castle, and it seems really strange. But then when you start to think for a second, you think back to that variation we just looked at, and I'll put the position back on the board for 1 second. I'm going to click it. So when we looked at this position, the problem is the isolated pawn, right? And we mentioned that black wants to take off the minor pieces. And in this variation, the dark squared bishop has already managed to be exchanged from b4 to d2. But now let's go back to king to f1, and let's take a look at this again. So comparing, the difference is there is no exchange of the dark squared bishop. So that's the one idea. It's actually, although it's very strange, there is a positional idea behind it. Because you're avoiding the exchange of the bishop, so you're keeping every single one of the minor pieces on the board. So in that variation with the strategic idea, you want to remove the minor pieces and get to a position where the pawn is a weakness. That isn't happening. So again, very, very unusual idea, but it actually does have a good thing about it. And it actually And one other side point is after I had seen this game, I decided to try this idea out in some blitz games. I actually won them because it threw my opponent off, and they didn't know what to do after that. And I wound up winning, so it does work. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's get back to the game. So, say the next move here, knight takes e4 is played. d5 is probably better than taking the pawn, but, pawn grabbing, it's tough to resist. d5. So here, black pieces are getting a little bit out of order. So knight e7, queen d4. This queen is centralized, knight f6. So black's been retreating his pieces away, been retreating the knights, and they've been going backwards. Bishop g5. So threatening to take the knight, maybe get the pawn back or double the pawns. Knight g6. Knight b d2. He's trying to get out of his pieces. h6, trying to question the bishop. Rook e1 check. King f8, now the black king has to move. So let's see here. So obviously if we look, blocking with the queen wouldn't be very good. And if bishop to e7, then white can take the knight because the bishop is pinned and won't be able to recapture. Okay, so king f8 played. Bishop to d3. So he's threatening this bishop now, because this bishop moves out of the way. Discover attack. He's threatening the bishop. And, although this bishop is attacked, he just says, well, I'm going to attack this bishop. Bishop to e7. Bishop takes on g6. So both bishops are attacked, so black has to decide which one to take. And so he chooses to take the dark squared bishop, okay? Knight to e5. And we're about to see a very rare sight. F takes g6, and we have a tripled pawn here. Which, this doesn't happen all the time. But it happens every once in a while, and I actually, when I've gotten it a few times, and whenever I get them, I say that triple pawns are 3 times as good, because strangely enough, although tripled pawns are absolutely horrible, the rare cases that I've actually gotten them, I've actually managed to win because of everything else that was going on. So very, very strange. Okay, knight takes, king to f7, rook takes e7, check. And the king's getting into some trouble here. King takes on g6. Usually not a good idea to have your king running around. Especially against somebody like Marshall, who obviously was a great attacker. Queen d3 check. King to h6. h4, so trying to get into the rook, into the game. And interestingly enough, it's actually a good thing that this rook here is here on h1, because he's going to play a part in the attack, which wouldn't have happened if white had castled. g4. So obviously black wants to try to keep that lane closed. h5. So threatening to checkmate here, just leaving this rook hanging, just threatening a checkmate here. Knight takes on h5. Queen to f5. so threatening another checkmate. Queen takes on h5. g6. Queen f4 check. Notice the pin, so knight can't take the queen. g5. Only legal move. And then, maybe you already see the checkmate here. Queen f6 checkmate. So there is one thing about this last move. So I did hear that there is some type of dispute about how the game ended. Some people say that he resigned after move 21, but I'm gonna just put this on the board and say that it was like this because that way we can at least see the checkmate, and we see how the game was going to end, and also I think that it may have been this way because I think that people resigned less many years ago than they did today, and so it's possible that he just played on till the end because people would always play like on till checkmate back in the early 1900s. So I think it might be likely that it actually ended this way. But anyway, there's some history about the game too, so maybe you can look into it. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. Thanks for watching. Bye.